A man dies, and before his grave settles, his brother is expected to take his wife, not date her, not court her, inherit her. This isn't fiction. It's documented across multiple cultures, past and present. And what happens next doesn't just reshape one life. It can determine whether a woman survives or loses everything. Because in many traditional systems, a widow without a husband can lose her land, her home, even her children. So the question isn't just shocking, it's urgent. Who takes her? And what happens if no one does? But that's not the strangest part. In some communities, refusing this role can bring shame. In others, the replacement husband isn't even family. And before we go further, this isn't a regional tradition. It has a name: Levirate marriage, from the Latin word for brother-in-law. It appears in the Hebrew Bible, in ancient Rome, in ancient China, in pre-colonial India. Every major civilization that ever existed independently built the same system. That is not a coincidence. That is a blueprint. And the question isn't where it started. The question is why every society arrived at the same answer, and what that answer cost. Let's ground this in reality. In rural Nigeria, cases like the one described in local accounts show exactly how this unfolds. A man dies suddenly. Within days, elders gather, not to comfort, but to decide. His widow must remain in the family, and his brother is expected to step in, not out of romance, out of duty. Because historically, this system had logic. In patriarchal societies where women often couldn't inherit property, widowhood could mean instant poverty, no land rights, no income, no protection. So families created a solution: keep her inside the bloodline, assign responsibility to a male relative, preserve the children's lineage. It wasn't designed as control, it was designed as survival. But that wasn't the strangest part, because across continents, completely different cultures created the exact same system. Travel to Western Kenya, near Lake Victoria, among the Luo people. Wife inheritance has been documented for generations. A man dies, and discussions begin almost immediately. Who inherits the widow? Traditionally, a brother or close male relative steps in, not to replace love, but to replace structure, provide food, protect land, raise children under the same family name. But by the late 1990s and early 2000s, researchers uncovered a twist. Some families stopped taking responsibility, so they hired outsiders, men known as professional inheritors, strangers, stepping into intimate roles. That's when the system shifted from family duty to something far more controversial. But here's what refusing actually looks like. It has a name: property grabbing. When a widow refuses inheritance, in-laws can invoke traditional authority to remove her from the home, take the land, seize livestock, confiscate savings. Documented cases show women expelled within 24 hours of refusal, not threatened, removed. The tradition wasn't enforced by law, it was enforced by the family she still needed to survive. And that is the mechanism. That is how the choice works. Stay and accept, or leave with nothing. In 24 hours, now move north to Uganda. Among the Acholi people, the logic was different, but just as structured. The widow wasn't transferred, she was retained, kept within the lineage. So the family unit didn't collapse. But decades of conflict, especially during the early 2000s Lord's Resistance Army insurgency, disrupted entire communities. And with that, traditions began to weaken. Yet in rural areas, they didn't disappear. Shift again, into southeastern Nigeria. Among the Igbo people, wife inheritance historically protected property, because land wasn't just wealth, it was identity. If a widow remarried outside the family, land could be lost forever. So the system ensured one thing: the bloodline stayed intact. And then there are the Yoruba people. Similar customs existed, but less dominant. Today they're largely replaced by modern legal systems, but traces still remain in rural traditions. Further south, among the Zulu people, the same pattern appears: widow inheritance. Framed not as ownership, but obligation, a social safety net in a world without one. But here's where everything changes. By the 1990s, something unexpected happened. Public health researchers in East Africa began noticing patterns. In regions where wife inheritance was practiced, HIV rates were rising rapidly. And the connection was clear. The system often required sexual relations to formalize the inheritance, which meant one infection could spread through an entire extended family. By 1999, elders among the Luo publicly attempted reforms, but enforcement was inconsistent, and in some cases, the practice became even more dangerous because a new role emerged: the cleansers. And this is where it stops being a tradition and becomes something else entirely. Public health researchers documented this specifically in Western Kenya in the late 1990s. The cleanser is a recognized figure, sometimes paid, sometimes operating under community authority. His role: to perform a ritual involving unprotected sex to purify the widow after her husband's death, without medical protection, without consent in documented cases. And here is the compounding danger: a widow who refused the ritual was sometimes considered spiritually unclean, dangerous to the community, which created a second layer of pressure. Refuse the inheritance and face exile. Refuse the cleanser and face something worse. One infection, through one ritual, could move through an entire extended family. That is not a side effect. That is the system operating exactly as designed, at the worst possible moment. What began as a survival system was now being linked to a public health crisis. But that still wasn't the deepest conflict, because the real tension is human. For the widow, the moment of loss doesn't end with grief. It begins a negotiation: stay and accept inheritance, or refuse and risk losing everything: her home, her land, her children's future. In documented cases, widows who refused were evicted by in-laws, left with nothing. So the choice isn't freedom, it's survival. For the brother, the pressure is just as real. He inherits responsibility overnight: another household, more children, more financial strain, often without choice, and sometimes without willingness. But here's the twist: the system doesn't always deliver what it promises. Reports show that some inheritors provide little to no support, leaving the widow tied to a man who doesn't protect her, turning a safety net into a trap. And yet, in some regions, the tradition is evolving. A symbolic version is emerging: no forced marriage, no sexual obligation, just guardianship, financial support without control. A compromise between culture and modern rights. But one question still refuses to disappear. Because this isn't just one culture, it's a global pattern. Even in the Bible, there are clear examples of wife inheritance tied to duty, lineage, and identity. In the Old Testament, the practice of Levirate marriage is explicitly commanded. A man was required to marry his deceased brother's widow to preserve his brother's name and inheritance. This law is laid out in Deuteronomy 25:5-10, where refusal wasn't just personal, it carried public shame and social consequences. And this wasn't just theoretical, it played out in real narratives. One of the clearest examples appears in the story of Judah, Tamar, and Onan in Genesis 38. After Tamar's husband dies, Onan is expected to fulfill his duty by producing an heir in his brother's name. But he deliberately avoids it. The act is treated as a serious violation of obligation, reinforcing how deeply this duty was embedded in the system. So across history, across continents, different societies ask the same question. What happens to a woman when survival depends on family, and that family loses its provider? And the answers they created still exist today, quietly, controversially, unevenly. And the law? Kenya and Nigeria both have legal protections for widows, property rights, inheritance rights, rights that exist on paper. Kenyan courts have heard property-grabbing cases, ruled in favor of widows, issued judgments. But here's where the ruling ends. At the edge of the rural community where the practice is strongest, the court's jurisdiction stops at the village boundary. The elder's authority doesn't. So the law exists. Enforcement does not consistently, not where it matters most. A widow in Nairobi can file a case and win. A widow near Lake Victoria can lose her home in 24 hours, and the system that put her there has been operating for generations. Uninterrupted, that is the gap between the law that was written and the life that was lived. So now we return to the beginning. A man dies, and his brother is expected to take his wife. But now you see it differently, because depending on where you stand, that act can look like protection or control, care or coercion. And maybe that's the most uncomfortable truth of all. The same tradition that once saved lives can also take away choice. So here's the question that doesn't go away. In a world that's changing fast, should this system evolve or disappear completely? If you made it this far, you already know this isn't simple. Subscribe, because we're uncovering the truths most people never talk about.